Let's solve the first part and the second part using only Vim, and let's see how much time it will take me. First, I'm going to start by recording a macro, and I'm going to save the current line. And also, I'm going to calculate the midpoint, which is length of str divided by 2. Now, I can just split the line in two parts. Part 1, part 2. I'm going to use str from 0 until mid minus 1. And second one is from mid till the end of the list. Now, let's find the common character in both parts. I'm going to use a couple of Unix utils. I'm going to echo the first part to grep, and I'm going to use the second part as a regex. Isn't that cool? And then I'm going to sort only the unique characters. And just to be extra safe, I'm just going to get the first one. I'm going to apply the macro on all lines. Substitute each line to number, submatch 0. Okay, I'm going to use paste and pass everything to the basic calculator. And that's it. Now let's see how we can solve the second part. If I go back, find the common character, we can use the same thing. Instead of just keeping a command, I can transform it to a function. So if I paste this in here, let's say I'm going to call this function intersect. Instead of head, let's just use translate deletes, new lines. And let's say that this function takes A and B. Okay, so instead of saying part 1 here, it should be A, B, and I'm going to pass this to system. Now I have intersect. Let's create a counter. And then I'm going to select all lines using command, and I'm going to say take the current line and join it with the next two lines. I'm going to split wherever I have joined, pass that to reduce, and I'm going to intersect. We're going to use our function to intersect. And finally, I'm going to call character. Okay, you remember the counter we just created, so I'm going to say counter. So when I run this, now if I echo counter, you can see it gives me 2,500, and 2,569 is the result of the second part of the challenge. So as you can see, it didn't take us any effort to solve the second part. Now, enough of this. Let's just start this tutorial the way it's supposed to be. Again, every time you're going to see me use Vim to accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish using programming languages, but faster. Because the challenge is so easy for us, every time I add a couple of rules. Yeah, let's just get started. If I say echo ABC, right? I get ABC. Now, if I try to grep this, pass it to grep, and I say, you know what? Like, if you find A, please show me A. So what we care about occurrences, not the highlighted character. So I can say only show me the matched character. Now you can see I only get A. Now, in our case, we can use a group of characters. I can say if you find A or C. And when I run this, you can see I get A and C. Now you know how we extract the unique character. So how can we run it inside Vim? We can say echo part 1 and then pass it to grep, right? And just say grep-o part 2. But can we really say that? This thing is a shell command, and shell commands do not have access to our variables. Anything that is inside Vim, they don't have access to. So what we need to do, we need to construct a command and use a utility that will help us run this command. So this utility, we saw it, it was execute. And then I can pass in my string. Then I can concatenate with the rest. But it's not clean. So the cleanest way to do this is just to use printf to construct our string. And this is the reason why we're using printf. Now, what I'm interested at is running the command. So I'm going to say this is a shell command, but I want the result of this command to be replaced in the current line. And I accomplish that by using the dot character. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Now, all we need to do is just sort it and only keep the unique characters or the unique lines. And then, just to be extra safe, but this is not really needed, I used head -1. Now what I'm left with is just repeating this macro on the rest of the lines. You already know how to do this. This is episode 3 and we did it many times. So I can just say from this line until the end of the file, normal at q. It extracted all the unique characters on each line. The next part is we need to convert each unique character to a priority. Now if you go back to the challenge, you can see the way how we calculate the priority. If they are from lowercase a to z, they are from 1 to 26, and uppercase A to Z, they are from 27 to 2. So how can we accomplish the same thing? Well, echo character to number and give me the distance from C minus character to number of my starting point. So for lowercase characters, the starting point is lowercase a, right? Character to number. But you can see that it's given me 2 because I have only calculated the distance between C and A. I need to shift this by 1 so that I won't get a number that is 0 based in. For example, here in the example, they give us P, which is 16. So if I try to say P, I get 16. Okay, that's awesome. Now, how about uppercase? So if I have uppercase L, so what is the starting point for uppercase letter? It's uppercase A. But if I run this, I'm getting 12, which is not correct. Why is it not correct? Well, the reason why, because we need to shift all the uppercase letters by 26. Character to number of uppercase A plus 1 plus 26. You know, these are constants. They will never change. So we can just calculate that. Uppercase A plus 1 plus 26, it will turn to be 38. Now, let's create a function that will take a unique character and print the priority. Now, to use this function, I can just select all lines and select all the content for each line and just use the expression register. Okay, so we're going to use our function character to number, and I'm going to use submatch to give it what we just selected. And as you can see, we have converted successfully every unique character to a priority. Okay, that's it. Now, all I have to do is just, select the whole buffer and run paste, sequential series, and add my own separator. And finally, just use the basic calculator. And that's the answer for the first part. Let me go back to the command we used before, which is right here, right? Let's create a function and let's call it intersect. We're not going to use to select the current line because we don't have any line, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say this function takes A and B and it returns the results of the following. We echo the first part to grep and we use the second part as a regex. That's great. And then we sort the unique characters. That's awesome. And finally, we use head. Now, here's the question. This is actually parts of the exercises that you're going to go through, so I'm not going to answer this question. By the way, I put the answers on Twitter, so if you care about the answers for the exercises, just follow me on Twitter. Now, I'm not going to use head here, and I want you to think about it for a second. Why I'm not going to use head? I'm not going to give you a lot of hints because, again, this is an exercise. Now, there's one more thing. Printf will return a string, so we need to execute that. Before we used :execute, which is a command. Now, what is the counterpart of that as a function? Well, it's called system. Well, there are a couple of differences, but they kind of achieve the same thing. However, I just want to let you know that there is an execute function if you are interested. Now, I'm just gonna run this, and now I have a function called intersect. That's it. So to solve the second part, I'm just going to create a counter, initialize this counter to 0, and then I'm going to use the global command to select every line. And then I'm going to say, select the current line and merge it with the next 2 lines. Okay, join it with the next one. And after you do that, you're going to have a new line. And this line will contain 3 strings separated by a space because that's the default behavior of join. I'm going to get the line, so I'm going to get the content of the line, and then I'm going to split by space. I'm going to pass the result of this function to reduce, okay? And inside reduce, what's our reducer? Well, we talked about it. It's intersect. Once I reduce this, what am I left with? Well, I can just use character to number. What I'm interested at is accumulating all the priority value. Go back to the counter and increment the counter by the result of this function composition. It was a typo. I should say intersect. Now, when I run this, you can see everything was changed. And if I try to echo our counter, you can see I'm getting 78, which is the correct answer for this input data. Now it's time to solve the second scenario. Okay, so before we solve the second scenario, we have a couple of rules that we need to take into consideration. Okay, so the first thing is character to number. We talked about it. Let's just pass it. Now, the next thing is intersect. With intersect, I can use the same definition that I did before, but why not just have more fun and try to re-implement it in a different way, just a little bit differently. So you're not allowed to use Unix utils, just use anything that only comes with Vim script. So intersect is a function that takes A and B, right? I'm going to take the first set, which is A, and I'm going to split each character individually. Okay, so the way how I can do this is by using split. So I want to split A, but the thing is, there's no separator. What is the separator that I can use to say that I want to take this string and split it by each character? How can I do that? Well, it turns out that we can use zero width operators. So I can say I want to use a Z is for zero width, and here I can specify, is it E or is it S? So S stands for start and E stands for end. And I want you to think of this as a marker. Now let me try to print this so I can show you. So if I say echo, so we should get ABC. Okay, so I'm using zero end, and if I use zero start, I'm also getting ABC. Now that I have a list of characters, I can check if these characters do exist in the other set, which is the B set. I'm going to map over this A set, individually check that each character does exist in the B set. So I'm going to use filter to map over them. So for every character, I'm going to check if this character does exist. A nicer way to do this faster is just to use regex. This character, does it satisfy the... I'm going to also use the pound sign to tell them that this is case sensitive, and our regex, it's just, the whole set B. That's it. I need to pass the actual value of B. So I'm going to concatenate that with the variable B. And that's it. If I run this now, I'm only getting A, which is the only character that matches. What is the last thing we need to do? Instead of returning this as a list, we need to return it as a string. So I can say, you know what? I want you to join everything back together and do not use any delimiter. So it's going to be an empty string. And when I run this, you can see I'm only getting A. And that is intersect. What if I say get priority in the future, it will be called only after each line was processed. Processed how? Think of it this way. So if I have a line and I want to split the line in two, I can just add the separator in half, okay? And now I have two chunks. Yes, they are one string, but they are separated by a space. So I can treat that, okay? Now you might say, well, that will work, if I want to split a line in two or in three or in four. But how about if I want to join lines? Splitting and joining is not the same thing. Well, actually, it is the same thing. You see, this is the beauty when we try to make things as general as possible. Is you start to think a little bit outside the box. So splitting and joining is the same thing. It's just how we play with these inputs, okay? Because if I join three lines, basically all I'm doing is I'm combining three lines with three separators. That's all I'm doing. It's the same thing, okay? So get priority assumes that in the future it will be called if str is already processed, and str will contain separators. To keep things simple, let's say the separator is going to be just a white space. First of all, I want you to split this str, and once you split that, I want you to call reduce on it, because you're going to have a list of chunks. I'm just going to use intersect, and once we're done with intersect, once we find the count character, I can just call character to number. It's as simple as this. Okay, so I have just added this small function. It's called space every. So this is useful so that we can achieve the solution for the first part and the second part only using this function. As I said before, splitting and joining is the same thing. So let's see how we can do this. Now, before I create any more utilities, let's just read the input file. These are the lines, okay? Now, what I'm going to do, I want to be capable of just, mapping over this and just saying something like every line, I want to split it in half like this. Let's in half, which is a function that takes, let's say, a string, which is a line, right? Let's say it takes a line. I'm going to call space every, and the first one is the interval. If I want to split something in half, what is the interval? Well, the interval is the median, length of line divided by 2. That is the interval that I want. Space every does not accept a string, so we need to split that. When space every returns the new set of chunks separated by an empty space, we just need to join that to a string. And now, as you can see, we have successfully added a separator, a white space, to each line. That was very simple. After we have added our separator, we can easily just call get priority. Again, I'm going to use v-value. And when I run this, you can see that get priority is capable of getting the priority value of each line. Okay. Now, the only thing that we are left with is instead of mapping, I just need now to calculate the sum. So I'm just going to use reduce. So as you can see, 157, that is the solution for the first part. And the second part is instead of splitting in half, we need to figure out a way to group by 3. Okay, so how can we do that? Now, before I start creating the implementation of group 3, let me try first to generate, let's say, 20 lines. Let's say I'm going to have a range of 20 and I'm going to map over it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use printf, and I'm going to return the following. I'm going to say line and the number of the line, maybe line 1, line 2. This is just an example. So instead of 1, I'm going to use digit here, and our digit is going to be value. Okay, because I'm going to put this inside the list, so let's join everything with a comma, okay? And maybe a space, why not? And I'm going to echo, I'm going to call group by 3, and I'm going to pass it this, okay? So that's beautiful. Now, let's create group by 3. Let's call them lines here. The first thing, let's use space every, and here we need to say, because we are grouping by 3, so let's just space by 3. The second thing is we need to pass in lines. So I try to run this. You can see now line 0, line 1, line 2, and then we have a space separate, okay? So you can see we have successfully inserted a space separator. Now we have a way to separate between lines. The reason why I'm saying this, because next I'm just going to join all the chunks together, okay? So I'm going to use another separator. So I'm going to say join, and let's say I'm going to use a comma. Now when I run this, you can see we have added a new separate comma, but we still have our space. So we still have a way to distinguish between new lines, okay? Now all I have to do is just, split it again, okay? And as you can see, we have successfully split each line individually. Now, just to clean things up, we just need to remove this comma. I'm going to map again, and for every v value, I'm going to split it, but this time we need to split by comma, so I need to say comma, okay? And once I do this, you can see I'm getting all the chunks together. Well, before I return the chunks, what about joining them again? I can join them with space. All right, that's beautiful. That is group by 3. All I have to do now is, instead of using this in half, I just say, well, I want you to group by 3, and yeah, that's it. So when I run this, hold on, I need to just delete this example. So when I run this, I am getting 70, which is the correct answer. Okay, so as you can see, that's it. That's all there is to it. So we have solved the first part and the second part. But the thing is, we didn't just solve the original challenge. We actually solved the enhanced challenge, where this is a lot more future-proof. We can split lines by n. We can draw lines by n. Now, there's one more thing that I need to mention, but this is actually mentioned in the exercise section. What would be optimal is if we have a function that takes a specific delimiter and it adds it. I'm not going to show you how to do it because this is included in the exercise section. And the reason why you need to be capable of adding a different delimiter is, what if each line contains a space? Then if we add spaces, it's just not going to work. You need to always add a delimiter that does not exist. It needs to be unique. So when I say, for example, edit, and I specify the input file, let's say my file is called day3.vim. When I do this, what I'm doing here is I'm loading this file in the buffer. I can achieve the same thing using commands. If I say buffer add, so I can load day3.vim, and then I can select this buffer by saying buffer 3.vim. And let's say once I switch this file, I want to come back to this current file that I'm at. What is the name of this file? Script3.vim, okay? So let's say once you finish, I want you to come back to scripts3.vim. So if I run this, nothing is happening. Well, actually, a lot is happening. Vim is so fast. It loaded the buffer, it went to that buffer, and it came back. If you try to do this in VS Code, first of all, you can't do it, but let's say you can, VS Code will explode. What if I comment this line and I run this? Now you can see that the script is capable of taking us to this buffer. So let me go back manually. You might be asking yourself, like, why are you showing me this? Well, I'm showing you this for one reason. The reason why you create these scripts need to be standalone. You don't need to help the script to load the input file. This is not accepted because sometimes we might have a lot of files, not just one file. Okay, so the buffer is very helpful. Now, let me show you something. Inside these two lines, I can input any line I want because now the file is loaded to the memory and I can just perform anything I want the normal way. Let's say I'm going to perform a normal command. I want to go to the first line and I want to append space, then hide. Okay, so if I run this, I go back, you can see we have this hider in here. Let me undo this. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say normal undo. And the reason why I'm undoing this is so that we cannot change the contents of the buffer. For the first scenario, the first part and the second part, there's no need for us to change the contents of the buffer. We can just perform all the actions that we want, perform all the commands that we want, save that into a variable, and just print it. In the exercise section, you're going to be asked to create a buffer, redo what we did in the first scenario, the first parts and the second parts, but only using commands and buffers. The exercise solutions, I put them on Twitter. So I'm just gonna, from time to time, gonna share the exercises. Because now, look, you have enough knowledge and you need to be capable of solving the exercises on your own. But sometimes you might just want to see how I solve it myself, so I'm gonna share them on Twitter. If you care, follow me there.
Good morning. Wake up.